All right, well, staying in Latin America now, it's time for Media Watch. James Creedon is here. And James, you've been looking at how people online have been reacting to these protests in Venezuela. They're calling for Nicolas Maduro to step down. Some calling him a dictator for overriding that referendum, which was supposed to bring about his removal. Venezuela, of course, in the midst of a terrible economic crisis right now.
Right. So just a quick look at how it's playing out on social media. First of all, the Facebook page of Nicolas Maduro, where you would think that nothing was happening at all. It all sounds very positive indeed. Venezuela triumphs once again in its Bolivarian diplomacy and revolution. And he's talking here about a whistle-stop tour that he's just come back from, where he said ties were strengthened and cooperation was strengthened between Venezuela, Iran, Azerbaijan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. This was a tour to strengthen our oil energy, but it also incorporated spiritual energy when we visited Pope Francis in the Vatican. It all sounds wonderful, except actually the headlines that we've been seeing for the last number of weeks emerging from Venezuela are absolutely terrifying. And these are just snapshots, right? But there was a report on the 10th of October of overcrowding in a prison, in one particular prison, and an incident of cannibalism. And then there are other instances of morgues not being emptied, autopsies not taking place, basically the whole infrastructure of the country crumbling. You have this headline in the Financial Times talking about Venezuela's wealthy building their own oasis because inflation, food prices, everything. There's just the whole commercial infrastructure of the country is collapsing. So perhaps no surprise then that you have so many people taking to the streets today calling for change. And the hashtag that they are using is La Toma de Venezuela, or the taking of Venezuela. In other words, taking over or
taking our country back.
Taking our country back. So that's kind of the theme, if you like. And you have, it's not just Caracas; it's towns such as Barquisimeto in the northern region of Lara.
Huge protest there.
Huge protests that's taken from a rooftop there, but you can see the streets are in fact full. You also have slogans such as this: Venezuela in the street with no return, and also calling on all of the Venezuelan people just to take to the streets to really show that they mean business. This is a live feed in real time from the capital, Caracas. There's something wrong with the feed there, but there are live images coming through essentially showing that right now there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in the streets.
It's the far cry, isn't it, from when Hugo Chavez was in power?
It is indeed, because I suppose you would have had rallies in favour of him as well.
Yes.
So having people in the streets is perhaps not different, but the reasons they're in the streets is very different. And you can see here a panoramic shot as well, also from Caracas, that was taken around 1 p.m. local time, showing a massive amount of people in the streets. Because
people are marching in support of Maduro as well, aren't they?
They are indeed, and that is being covered quite extensively by the state broadcaster, VTV, and they have their own set of hashtags. Instead of taking back Venezuela, you have Chavismo, which is, I suppose, the political current that Maduro inherited from Hugo Chavez. Chavismo and the streets in peace. So you have all of these different rallying cries. He did, in fact, speak. He did address a crowd in the streets of Caracas earlier today, and obviously making his appeals. He said they do not want dialogue because they want a coup, but they would not have this coup because peace shall be imposed. So
and they won't have a coup because the army say they back Maduro.
That's right, and so he's pitching himself as the person who is in favour of peace, I suppose you could say.
Peace and democracy.
Peace and democracy. Now, one interesting thing that's being that is feeding into this whole debate as well is accusations that he holds dual citizenship with Colombia, or that at least that at one point he did have Colombian citizenship. Venezuela's constitution forbids anyone to be a dual national and to be president. So some of the anti-Maduro protesters are using this argument against him. It's made the front pages of the newspapers as well, that his mother was Colombian, and therefore that he may have held Colombian citizenship, which would make him ineligible for the presidency. Just one final word on this. The state broadcaster VTV is tending to show quite tight shots or in smaller streets that might distort the image that there are larger crowds present, essentially. So they're avoiding massive panoramic shots that we might have been more used to during the massive gatherings in favour of Hugo Chavez. So the state broadcaster are very much in favour of Nicolas Maduro, and perhaps spinning their coverage in order to make him look a little bit better.
Clever photography there.
Indeed.
All right, James. Thank you
Thanks
very
a
much
lot.
indeed. James Creedon with Media Watch. Now it's